All right, guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to discuss the evolution of pump-action shotguns. Now, I do want to go ahead and throw in a couple of caveats here. The primary purpose of this video is to get after the idea that there's very little new under the sun. However, I also need to cover the fact that I'm not necessarily doing a comprehensive history of the evolution of shotguns because I don't have everything to show. So I'm doing the best I can with what I have in my collection. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get into our more targeted discussion here. Pump-action shotguns start off with the Winchester Model 1897, which is the most unorthodox looking of all the guns that we're going to talk about. So we have an exposed hammer. This is a very early concept and is indicative of the times, I guess you could say. So the system is by no means streamlined, and we shouldn't be unexpected, or that shouldn't be unexpected for a pioneer within a classification that did not yet exist. Now we get a better version of what the modern shotgun will become with the Winchester Model 12, which came out in 1912. And there are some models that kind of precede this and stuff like that. But what we wind up having is we no longer have an exposed hammer. And we start to have an emerging trend in how a bolt is designed, which is more adequately explained here with this Winchester Model 31L, previously reviewed on the channel, and link in the description. Now, one of the things that the 31L gets after that the Model 12 did not is the quick remove barrel. In order to be able to have that in a Model 12, you pretty much needed the takedown version. However, this has a reverse threaded screw and a little locking lug right here in order to be able to very quickly not only shorten this barrel, but also make the gun more accessible to be able to take down as well as clean. Now, takedown isn't... Well, that was unnecessary. Takedown is in quotations because I was actually trying to disassemble this gun in order to be able to get a look at its bolt. However, it was really fighting with me. I had some instructions out. I was just getting really frustrated because, like, specifically, perhaps it's this model, it just was not allowing the bolt carrier to come out. But on this gun, we start to see and the Model 12, we start to see the bolt and carrier come together. Now, a couple other features we'll go ahead and talk about. We have a single action bar right here. We do have a trigger pack that we can remove by just popping out a single bolt. The trigger pack pivots out. This is probably one of our earliest and modern pattern shotguns that we have moving forward. And it started production in 1931, as I mentioned before. Now, what we see, this gun would end production in 1949, but before this gun ended production, we get the JC Higgins Model 20. Previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. So once again, we have a single action bar right here. We have a non-removable barrel. This is a very much so budget gun, and removable barrels were not yet a standard at this point. So that's where the 31L is kind of a little bit ahead of the game, or the 31 in general is kind of a little bit ahead of the game. And then we also get to see our shuttle or bolt, what I refer to as a bolt carrier, and bolt arrangement. Now, this is very highly machined, and not too dissimilar in appearance to what we have in both the Model 31 and what was in the Model 1912. But if I may call your attention to yet another, rather today at least considered advanced feature, is that we have dual extractors right there, which is something that is commonly associated with the Mossberg 500. You'll hear people talk about it all the time. Oh yeah, it's such a reliable and durable bolt with its dual extractors and all that kind of stuff. Series Model 20 was doing it way before the Mossberg, which is kind of interesting all by itself. Now, something else that we have going on here, we have a locking lug set here in the rear of the bolt, and this locks into the receiver. This is something that would go away eventually. We would wind up going to alloy receivers. And alloy receivers are not going to hold up long term to a steel locking lug locking into a recess in them. They're eventually going to break, and that's not going to be a very good thing. That's the bolts is the plug for all the pressure that's supposed to be keeping everything going down the barrel. If that fails, it's all going to come back in the receiver, and that's not going to end well for anybody. So with the move to alloy receivers, we also saw a move to having a receiver extension coming off of the barrel, a barrel shank, if you will, that would receive the locking lug. And we first kind of see this sort of arrangement in the Remington 870, which we have a bolt right here out of my Wingmaster. Remington 870 Wingmaster, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. So, see there? Front-mounted locking lug, and this is supposed to interface with a barrel shank. Now, we did go to a single extractor, but, you know, it's not to say that there aren't some things to get walked back in evolution. Now, here is my Remington Model 870 Express chambered 12 gauge, previously viewed on the channel, link in the description. And as we can see, we now have dual action bars. Okay, we still have our quick and easy takedown pins, and then we also have a removable barrel, and here we can see our barrel shank. So, there's our barrel shank with our locking lug set into it. Come on. And we can see here in the Model 20 that I disassembled that our locking lug or our locking recess is located here in the top of the receiver. Still very common. Guys, keep in mind, shotguns are relatively low pressure cartridges. Shotgun shells are relatively low pressure cartridges. Like, you can get some pretty fast quote unquote velocities out of some loads, but they're still not generating near the pressures that like rifle cartridges generate. Now from there we get into the Mossberg 500. Once again, modern design, dual action bars, went to a tang mounted safety that made it more ambidextrous, easy pop out pins, and then a bolt carrier arrangement with a single locking lug and our dual extractors right there. You guys can see it. Dual extractors. Extremely modern design. So as we can see here, this gun came out in 1960. So not a whole lot's changed. And all the derivatives of these shotguns should be running this same type of system. Should have the dual action bar, should have the quick detach barrels, and all that kind of stuff. Not a lot has changed since 1930 to 1960. It's pretty much been the same moving forward for the last at this point, 65 years. One of the biggest innovations that has occurred is with the Winchester Model 1200 bolt, which I did a whole video on the Winchester Model 1200. Linked in the description, a whole discussion on what it is that makes the Winchester Model 1200 special. Also, I have done a review on my Mossberg 500, which if you guys are interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description. So here we can see that we have multiple locking lugs, first off, which is interesting. We don't have that with the rest of these. Single centrally located locking lug. Now, are these necessary? Do we have to have these multiple locking lugs and all that kind of stuff? No. Repeatable lockup is not as important in shotguns because we're not talking about precision guns. When we're talking about precision guns, yes, we need those mating surfaces to contact in the chamber the same way every time. That's why multi-locking lugs are really important in rifles. It's an accuracy thing because if you don't get the gun consistently closed up in the same manner absolutely every time with nice tight tolerances, you will have some shifts in accuracy that just can't be accounted for in any other way. We have a single extractor, so that's not necessarily like groundbreaking or anything along those lines, though I will say, this might be difficult to make out, but I will say that this extractor is much beefier than what we see in what we could call the more conventional design. Now, I don't necessarily know if I would call that a good thing. I think it's better to be able to spread out the energy that you're pulling on. But, I mean, this worked out well enough for Winchester. And then also, we have a rotating head. We don't have that in the rest of these. The rest of these, they conduct their lockup by lifting up into the system. And we also note that it is spring-loaded. So this is actively pushing the bolt into the forward position out of the locked position. So here we are locked, and then as soon as tension is relieved on this bolt by firing the round, this bolt wants to open. And this is what's supposed to make the Winchester Model 1200, 1300, Winchester SXP and all that kind of stuff. This is what's supposed to make them so fast, is that the bolt is working with you to open the gun. Now, as discussed previously with the Winchester Model 1200, that can also be a bad thing, because if this prematurely opens, the cartridge casing is still swelled up. You might lose contact with the base of the cartridge case. You might rip off the cartridge lip that you're hanging onto with that beefy extractor right there. Those are things that you have to kind of take into account whenever it is that you're talking about these types of systems. Now, are there probably other evolutionary tracks that have been gone down in bolt design whenever it is that it comes to a shotgun? Probably, but these are what I can actually physically represent here for you. So if you're a gun nerd like me and you like kind of talking about like design and innovation, all those types of things, then this is where you want to be. Now, one of the biggest issues that I have with this bolt is the screw right here on the bottom that keeps the bolt together. You have to remove this in order to be able to take it out of the gun, which if you're not careful, then your carrier here will fall off and the firing pin will shoot out, and then you're annoyed because, your stuff just went all over your gun room. But also, I need a screwdriver in order to be able to take this bolt down. So I need a tool. All the rest of these I took apart with nothing more than a punch. This I needed an actual tool for, and I don't particularly care for that type of setup. This is a pretty small screw. It's holding together some pretty important parts. So if I was out in the field and for whatever reason had to take my bolt apart and then the carrier fell off and the firing pin shot across the woods, I would be very upset. And my shotgun would be down. Like, it would just be completely useless. So how many times have you guys ever taken apart your guns out in the field? I haven't really had to do it very often, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. You fall into a mud hole, get stuck in a swamp or something along those lines. You might want to take your gun down and clean it up real quick. So something to take into account there. All right, guys, this was a super short video. Just me nerding out here for a little bit. I hope you guys found it interesting. I hope you guys got something out of it overall. I would be interested if you guys would want to see a comparison in speed between a Winchester Model 1200 and a Remington 870. So I think that might be something that's coming up in the future. I thought about it in the process of putting this video together. So with that, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.